appointers? Happy?
Happy to move.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Did you do item 4.7, regional transport?
Yes.
You did? I'm sorry.
Council, 31st of March.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Winters.
Just on page 95, Mr. Chair, of the Rotorua Lake Strategy Group, and it's resolution 4, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point it out to, I mean, we've had a big discussion around this, the targeted rate, but in there, in the bottom of, on the end of number 4, you'll see in brackets it's including for the purpose of reimbursement of the land use incentive. So I just wanted to make sure that councillors were aware of that, that's in the resolution for the targeted rate that's going to be that Rotorua Lakes Council are going to be consulting on. And I think that was a very good discussion that day, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to bring it aware to councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. A very salient point. And Chief Executive, we haven't had a response from the Ministry yet, have we, in terms of that resolution?
No, that's my understanding, not yet a response, but we are working very well in terms of getting a response.
Okay, thank you. Regional Council minutes of the 31st of March.
Happy to move.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Rose. I'll second. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Any matters arising out of those? Oh, thank you. Right, can we move to item number 9, Chairperson's report? We'll take it as read. Are there any matters councillors want some further explanation around? I'll just add that on the 7th of June I attended the Heads of Mission reception dinner in Tauranga. That was a very good event. It's not very often you get the sort of representation from Heads of Mission, which is essentially ambassadors from other countries attended Tauranga here. I think they were here for a couple of days. So those are opportunities that we should encourage. Anything else there in terms of my meeting schedule?
Just one item, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the Local Government New Zealand session on unpacking resource management reform.
Yes.
That video conference was excellent. And I think there's another 2 coming through, and I really encourage councillors to watch those.
Thank you, Councillor Neves. No doubt Councillor Crosby will take that feedback back to Susan Freeman-Green, the Chief Executive. Okay, I'll move the adoption of my report. Second to Councillor Love. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Right. 9.2, Waiapini Regional Council Draft Youth Engagement Plan for 202. So it's my pleasure to invite Stephanie McDonald and Darnie Manson. And I'll let you 2 ladies introduce the young ladies that we have coming forward to make a presentation in terms of this draft youth engagement program. And over to you, Stephanie.
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you. Although Steph and I did write this paper, we would like to hand the presentation slide over to these fantastic young ladies here. They are members of our Youth Involvement Project Group. They've been working on this plan since October last year.
Thank you, Darnie. Would you like them to introduce themselves, or would you like to introduce yourselves? Thank you, ladies. Away you go.
Papa ki tuana ngā tai ki mau au, I whakanukunuku hia, I whakaneke hia. I whiuareretia e hōtu a wahinerua ki te wai. Ki te tai wiwi, ki te tai wawa, ki te whai iau, ki te ao marama ti hei, mauri ora. Tauranga moana, tauranga tangata. Nei te paihire I ngā whenua taurikura ki ngā whakatipuranga e haere ake nei. Nei, amatare ki Maxwell Mihinui, he tū he māngai mo te tira ia bropu ki te whakatau I tēnei huihunga. E rere ana ngā mihi mai o hā kia kautau kua karapine mai ki te whakarongo ki tā mātou māhire hei whakapāreka I a rangatahi. I runga hoki, I ngā tau mahatanga maho o te wā, nei te mihi. Ko matare ki Maxwell Mihinui a hau, heuri no te aroa takitumi me ngaitahu, te kaumaona a kupakeke, I tupu ake au ki te pā o whakarewerewa, kurana hau ki te kurorau tawhiri. Nei rā te mihi. Tēnā koutou I tēnei aihui, mana watia a Matariki. And good morning to everyone and happy Māori New Year to you all. My name is Matariki and I come from the geothermal wonderlands of Whakarewarewa. So I am not only passionate about how the Regional Council is engaging with tangata whenua, but I'm also passionate to discuss the development of our engagement plan that we've been working so hard on that is binding the whenua with the future generations. I'd just like to give a warm thank you to the Regional Council for meeting with us on this fine afternoon. Standing here on behalf of our Yip Rōpū to start this gathering, especially on account of many trying times like COVID and the new flu, we are really appreciative of the opportunity to voice our concerns, our feedback and our feed forward. Other than that, I'd like to pass the mic on to Radhika.
Kia ora.
Ko Pituaki te manga, ko Tarawera te awa, ko Gujarat te iwi, ko Rajapaki te hapu, ko Radhika Zaya taku ingoa. Hi, I'm Radhika and I'm from Rotorua, but I grew up in Kawerau and went to school in Whakatane, so I have great appreciation for the Bay of Plenty. I'd like to thank the councillors for giving us the opportunity to present our youth engagement plan today. Over the last 9 months, we've had regular meetings, in-person workshops, community feedback and feedback from our peers in order to make this plan as strong as we could. Not many young people know who the Regional Council are and what work they do. We have created this plan in order to bridge that gap. Through unity of rangatahi and toi moana, the guardianship of our environment and people will thrive and live on for generations to come. This is the vision we have for the young people in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council moving forward. We have split out a plan into 4 focus areas that are important to us. Each of us here today will speak to those areas. Although kaitiakitanga can be defined simply as guardianship, to me its meaning emphasizes the great importance of looking after our environment, driven out of love and respect for the deep reciprocal relationship we share. As the environment cares for us, it is imperative that we do the same, which is why we have proposed these 3 goals. The first goal involves the provision of resources that inform young people about sustainable practices and the protection of natural resources. The second goal involves supporting environmental activities for young people to be involved with. Third goal involves creating resources for learners. We believe that achieving these goals will help equip and encourage our rangatahi to be the kaitiaki of tomorrow, which is encapsulated by this whakatauki. Kohi kohi nā ka kanoa. Whakaritea te pāhara keke, ke puawai nā hua. Gather the seeds, prepare the seabed carefully, and you'll be gifted with abundance. Meaning that if we want to create a new generation of kaitiaki, we must first gather them and prepare the way forward for them. I'll pass to Matariki.
Whanaungatanga. To encourage effective engagement between young people and the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, as well as creating meaningful relationships and interactions. Whanaungatanga is crucial in our engagement plan. The new world we've adapted to since COVID, we've been able to see more people come together and unite. In our Rōpū, we've done the same, but for the sake of improvement. Incorporating rangatahi on the discussion of relevant issues that affect their well-being provides us with a sense of belonging. Our aims are to acknowledge their opinions in a more effective way by creating open resources to kōrero. This kōrero can be as little or as much as what it is that the Bay of Plenty Regional Council actively does, how that benefits rangatahi, and how they protect and improve our environment that we so naturally love. Promoting sustainability, wellness, and council projects will become easier by engaging more in the lives of teenagers. By attending local night markets, showing face at youth organisations, and even holding school assemblies, we are taking steps forwards and opening the doors for youth to find attraction in council. Being more actively involved and maintaining the respect of the future generations in our community goes a long way. The values we hold, like kaitiakitanga, whanaungatanga, kotahitanga, and manaakitanga, are the same values we share in our community. Our plan is to identify more opportunities for council members to get in on the action. Whanaungatanga allows relationships to build off shared experiences and working together. Whanaungatanga bridges the gap between Bay of Plenty Regional Council and rangatahi, which is the Yip Rōpū's biggest goal. Once again, passing it to Radhika.
Kotahitanga is the concept of unity, togetherness, solidarity, and collective action. It is important to lift each other up. Kotahitanga is identifying as one and extending our awhina support to everyone and receiving the same back. We want council to equally value young people's views and voice in decision making. We are going to inherit all of the decisions made now. We need your support to be informed about and included in decisions that will impact us in the future. It is encouraging to see Waikato Regional Council's Rangatahi Voices and Environment Canterbury's Youth Roku uplifting youth voice in their regions. This is something we hope to do in the Bay of Plenty. This is what young people want. We need to be taken seriously. Our views and opinions need to be valued and have weight at the council table. We want you to think about how you're going to include us and actively inform us about opportunities to influence decisions. We need you to support us to get involved and have our say by providing us with information that is easy to find and understand. This will help us to give our feedback and ensure council hears our voices. I'd like to pass it to Lahaina.
Thank you, Radhika. Tēnā rā koutou katoa. Ko Lahaina ki o tōku ingoa, he moko puna tēnei no ngā pūmanawa e waru o te aroa. Tūhoi te autanga hauiti me Waikato. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. I will be sharing with you why manaakitanga is heavily valued in our rōpū. Manaakitanga is an important part of te ao Māori as it secures the strength of our whānau and communities and is something that we like to share far and wide. If we dive deeper into the meaning of manaakitanga, we can understand its past, use it in the future, and use it in the present day. The whakapapa history of manaakitanga derives from two very meaningful kupu, mana and akiaki. Mana is the essential life force within a person, place, and object. And akiaki is to uplift, protect, and care. So together we are to uplift, protect, and care for the life force within each person, each place, and each object. Focusing on the rangatahi youth of today, we can show manaakitanga in many ways. By respecting one another, including one another, and supporting one another. We are driven to reach as many rangatahi as possible, and with manaakitanga, it will become a reality. The future goals and actions in our plan are designed by rangatahi for rangatahi. We want to go out into our communities, include our diverse youth populations, and connect with them to build meaningful relationships. We want them to feel welcome, supported, and comfortable to be themselves and have their say. Manaaki tētahi ki tētahi, aha kua kōwai, aha kua nōhea. Show manaakitanga to everyone, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. Our rangatahi want to be heard. Our rangatahi want to feel comfortable, and our rangatahi want to be respected, not as rangatahi, but as rangatira, leaders. We are not just the leaders of tomorrow, but we are the leaders of today. With this support system, not only will our rangatahi thrive, but also our taiao environment. We are here today to present to you our youth engagement plan. We hope you recognise the mahi that has gone into creating this plan and the importance it has to our youth of today and our taiao. Thank you, councillors, for your time. Neira te mihi mai oha ki a koutou I tēnei rā mo te areare maiana o Waitaringa. Ki tēnei kaupapa, whakahirahira o mātou ngā rangatahi. Nō reira, huri no I tēnei whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Ora.
Thank you, ladies. You are very eloquent. Our paper is on page 109 of the agenda. The recommendation from staff is to seek your approval for the youth engagement plan, which sets the vision, goals and actions that we would seek to work on as an organisation for youth engagement.
Thank you, Steph. Councillors, we'll present a paper. Questions? Councillor Brundy, Councillor Nees.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation and well done. I'd just like to ask you, does that extend to physically getting out there and helping our community groups and restoration projects?
Working in with community care groups is definitely an action that's been identified, and we've already been working with our land management teams to connect with the care groups that we have in our community. So absolutely.
Councillor Neese.
I just want to thank you very much for all of the mahi that you put in. This is amazing. It's been an area where we wanted to make progress, but haven't managed to really make traction. And I guess now with your participation in the project, youth involvement project, we've now got fabulous vision. I've got some great goals and some really good actions. So congratulations to all the members of the team and Steve and Danny, who've done a really, really good job. And I'm looking forward very much, I really want to endorse and move this recommendation, endorse that we set this plan. And I'm looking forward to hearing more youth views going forward, and receiving the reports back that are saying that our focus on youth voices is actually making a difference in awareness in our community and participation by youth. So thank you very much, well done, and I'm very happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Neese, and moving the report. We'll come to the questions. Councillor Winters, then Councillor Rose.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just clarify for me the budget for this year's youth engagement plan, because we put 45 on page 110. We put 45 up for last year, but I'm sure it's 70,000. Is it 70 for this year?
Through you, Chair, there's an additional 45,000 allocated through the long-term plan. Previous funding from other works was reallocated to youth funding that have been the school sustainability, pollution busters, and the Enviro Schools programs. So altogether, it's about $80,000 that we have as our operational budget for youth.
Yep, thank you. Perfect.
Councillor Rose.
Ka mihi nui ki a koutou e te rangatahi o e te rakatahi ma e te rakatirama. Look, this document was really, really good to read. As a young person on council, it's really cool to see this plan not only written for rakatahi but by rakatahi. And I believe that moving forward, your involvement with Toi Moana will be greatly not only appreciated but needed, because moving forward we do have some really big conversations that we need to have, and we need our rakatahi involved in that kōrero. And so this plan is a really good stepping stone forward to ensuring that our rakatahi are involved in those conversations, both from a reform point of view, but also just from a regional council point of view as well. So I'm more than happy to second the motion there, Mr. Chair. And yeah, again, ka mihi nui ki a koe e te rakatirama. Thank you for the hard mahi that you've done, rakatahi. And yeah, please know that, and I'm sure others will agree, what you've done is very well done, and it's going to move our council forward in a very good manner. So ka mihi nui.
Good order, Councillor Rose, and thank you for seconding the recommendation. Councillor White, you've got a question. In doing so, would you like to acknowledge our rangatahi, please?
Yeah, kia ora, Chair. Yeah, tēnā koutou, ngā rangatira tai tamariki, mo o kōrua, mo o koutou whakāturanga, kia mātou, I raro I te korowai o Matariki. No reira ka anu I te mihi ki a koutou mo tēnā. Look, just to acknowledge the work you've done, the effort you've done, the words that you've helped to portray to us the underpinning values of what you were doing. All of the manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, kaitiakitanga are all fundamental foundation values for our people, and values that actually transcend across everybody. If we were to live those particular values, we would not have the problems we're having today. And as the future generations who are having to pick up the decisions of, let me just say, koeke like myself, who are making decisions, I look to my children, my next generation, my mokopuna, and their futures. That's where my occupation is right now. And I'm sure a number of us around this table feel the same way. So listening to your kōrero is very much to the heart of where we need to be and what we need to understand and what we need to comprehend moving forward, and blend your conversations with I guess, to underpin and underscore some of the critical issues we're facing now, climate change, environmental issues. We know those are high on the agenda, and you are the generation that's going to have to live with that more than probably most of us around this table. So on that particular note, I want to thank you once, thank you twice, thank you many, many times for your contribution. I'm pleased that the document has been moved and seconded. And with that, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manu inui, ngā rangatira tai tamariki. And this is from one of your kōrero from Te Aroa. I really, really value your kōrero. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. No questions, but just a comment, really. Kei a koutou wahine mā. Tēnō reka ki te whakarongo i a koutou ki te i tō kōrero i roto te reo Māori. Nō reira, ngā mihi ki a koutou. I just want to, support what Te Taru has just said to you, and thank you very much for the mahi that you've done, and look forward to future mahi and deliveries to our full council. The other thing that I've been thinking while you've been speaking, that, we're looking for transformational change in council, and one of those transformational may well be that we form some sort of rangatahi subcommittee of council. So maybe that's a discussion in the next triennium that I'm sure you would help us with. Nō reira, tēnā koutou.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Thompson.
Kia ora. I just want to endorse what everyone else has said. Absolutely magnificent work. Te mana o wahine. Any men? Oh, I was just wondering to my colleagues, anybody else feeling particularly old at the moment? But no, absolutely fantastic. But I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the leadership shown by Councillor Rose. I think, Councillor Rose, that this will be your legacy, and you richly deserve to have that acknowledged. You've been ably supported by Councillor Nees and Councillor Eaty, but just to acknowledge that you have led, the desire and what's come out of today from the council desk perspective. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, but thank you, magnificent.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Right, ladies, could I just further endorse the comments that have been made? Could I also acknowledge your professionalism, your competency in terms of presenting here today a very good quality document? And it's not very often that councillors adopt a document with any serious questioning, but you've got through today. So congratulations to each and every one of you, and to your colleagues who weren't here today. So I'm going to put the resolution, which has been moved and seconded, which is the adoption of your youth program. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you once again, ladies. And just before you disappear, Matariki, are you one of Roko's?
Yes, Kororoku's. Moko? Yeah. That's my dad's mum's brother.
Okay, we just passed our acknowledgement on to Roko. If you follow in his footsteps, Te Ara was going to be well served.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, councillors. 9.3, adoption of the annual plan and related policies. Yeah, well, yeah. And so, councillors, I've just, in reading this, this is really procedural because we've discussed this numerous times, but I just noted in the executive summary, there's just been one change, has been incorporated into the rates and remuneration policy, which we probably didn't cover off in previous.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kamaran is also online. I'd just like to say a few words in terms of, I'm very pleased that we can present this annual plan for your approval with the accompanying rate setting papers. This annual plan continues the ambitious and transformational work program for this regional council. While the total average rate increase of 2.2% is lower than what was forecast in the long-term plan, Council continues to invest in new projects and services for its communities. These include in your 3 impact areas, a new funding round for community-led climate change adaptation projects, a new future fit carbon footprint tool for households across the region, supporting an independent iwi co-covenant secretariat as well as 3rd generation hapu and iwi management plans, promoting broad participation in local government elections later this year, and looking for more opportunities to pilot participatory budgeting. In addition, and looking into the future, this annual plan also includes more funding to support urban growth-focused spatial planning, particularly in the east and in Rotorua, funding for a Bay of Plenty transport emissions reduction plan, improved safety and security for bus services in Tauranga and the Western Bay, funding to address climate change impacts and flood schemes in the Eastern Bay, and funding for Rotorua catchment environmental programs. Financially, this annual plan maintains your general rates increase of 5.8% as per the long-term plan forecasts, while recognising that there has been unexpected and significant inflation increases this year. These have been achieved through both efficiency savings and increased dividend flows from Quayside Holdings, reflecting the better than expected performance of Quayside. Finally, this year also sees the Regional Council collecting its own rates with the approval of this annual plan. This project has been successfully implemented on time and under budget and will save $6 million in coming years, so that while these improvements in the annual plan are included here, they are impactful for the entire Bay of Plenty community. Kamaran is also here to answer your questions. We're taking the entire suite as read.
Councillor Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All these matters have been discussed, I won't say ad nauseam, but we've certainly got consensus about all these matters in previous workshops. I see no point in doing anything other than moving all these recommendations, and I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Councillor Neese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to second, but I've got 2 minor suggestions for the annual report summary. Just in the introductory statement from the Chief Executive and the Chair, shouldn't we use the words average real targeted rates increase of 0.9% instead of overall there is an increase of 0.9%? Just as we've talked about this before, being precise about what we mean with percentage increases. And the second one is on page 206, where we have the back end of the waka. I just wonder if we shouldn't have an English translation of the Maori phrase on that page.
Thank you, Councillor Neese. Chief Executive or Kamaran?
Through you, Chair, happy to accommodate those changes.
Thank you, Councillor Neese. Any further questions? Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. I do support the recommendations. These are challenging times, and I think the Council and the Chief Executive and staff have prepared us well. The reason why we can do this, of course, is because not only of Quayside, but the management of our reserves. And I think it's important that we make sure that both those financial instruments are maintained for future councils, and that we don't utilise all the reserves over a period of time without refilling those particular reserve amounts, which is something I've said for some time, and we had quite a substantial report and workshop on that by the team, and I look forward to making sure over the next year or two that we do carry on and make sure that our ability to sustain the use of those reserves and the dividend from Quayside is actually sustainable, for future generations. That's been the basis of this council, and we've been able to demonstrate the benefit of both those instruments across the Bay of Plenty, and it's just really important that they're maintained.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. Of those very pertinent comments, the resolutions have been moved and seconded. I intend to put them. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That takes us through to 9.4, setting of the rates for 22-23 financial year. And I understand, councillors, that there is to be one small adjustment there. So if you go through to page 272, recommendation 25, Kumaran, just like to introduce the adjustment that needs to be made there, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. And just to achieve consistency with the suggested change in the rates postponement and remission policy signalled in the previous agenda item, receiving legal advice on ensuring legal compliance with all of the resolutions set out in this report. The amendment to recommendation 25 is to achieve consistency with that proposed policy change. So that's in essence the nature of the change that's reflected in front of you today.
Thank you, Kumaran. Councillors, any questions?
I'll move it.
If not, Councillor Love, you've moved. Thank you.
Oh, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. 9.5, Taronga Stadium. Thank you, team.
Set for 2 p.m. That's when we will have that.
I don't know. 9.6, approval of proposed plan change 6. Ruth not here either? Okay, well, are we going to do this or not?
Yes. June's just going to get started.
Okay, we'll keep going. We'll do 9.7, Central Government Co-Investment and Flood Protection. Mr. Engel, I see you here. So the background to this, council, is, as you're all aware, there's been ongoing dialogue through the regional sector, representations from the regional sector to many ministers in terms of this kaupapa, which is essentially seeking ongoing contribution from the Crown for co-investment across the Motu to do with flood protection systems. Essentially on the basis that historically the Crown has fronted up with a whole lot of capital for some of these now aged investments, and sitting behind, in other words, enjoying the protection of these flood protection schemes is a whole lot of Crown assets in terms of roading, electricity distribution, other software, infrastructure items. Mr. Engel.
I think we have a PowerPoint.
Yes, we do. The chair, Mark Townsend was going to share that from Britannia. I'm just emailing him now.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, we've jumped a little bit ahead of the schedule, but Mark is joining us, hopefully any second now. He's, I think, only got about 4 slides, and you've pretty much summarised it yourself. This is a huge opportunity for the regional sector to gain the trust of central government to co-invest in these flood protection infrastructure. It's something that's been worked on for the last several years. It started off with the Tonkin and Taylor report, I think about 5 years ago, that demonstrated the benefit of investing in flood protection as something like 20 or 30 to 1. So, you know, you put $1 in and you get $30 back in terms of benefits. And of course, we've seen that time and again, especially after the floods that we saw in the South Island, Ashburton, West Coast, and up in the Blenheim area just a few months ago. And if you don't have that flood protection infrastructure, you get serious damage. So, and then the insurance costs, of course, come in as well.
I think, Chris, this is a cross-sector initiative through one of the SIGs, and the past chief executive, not past in terms of passed on, but Basil Chamberlain from Taranaki was the lead on this. I think from the SIGs, is Taranaki still fronting this? Or is it Wellington? I think it's Wellington now.
Yes, it's Greater Wellington mostly, but there are Mark Townsend is one of 5. Oh, here we go. He's online now. He's one of 5 workstream leads for that river SIG, and so Mark's involved in a lot of this work himself. If you're online, Mark, I'll just hand over to you to start speaking to this. But German leaders already pretty much covered it, and I think I have as well. But you can go into a bit more detail.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, kia ora, Mr. Chairman and councillors. Sorry, I wasn't ready for you, but ahead of time. So anyway, I'll just quickly go through. I think it's only about 4 slides, and really just to sum up. And as Chris says, it sounds like you guys have covered a few things already. But yeah, so central government co-investment and flood protection. As you can see, that's Edgecombe in the background there. A bit of background. So in 2019, we were part of a joint report from the New Zealand River Managers seeking central government co-investment. I guess indirectly as a result of that, I guess we highlighted the issue, and of course when it came to shovel-ready COVID money across New Zealand, we got 211 million of funding, and as you know, we got close to 30 million of that. Subsequent to that, there were some floods in Canterbury, and the picture you can see there is in South Canterbury. That same weather system hit Marlborough as well, and then of course we've had a couple of floods in the Westport Villa area, which were quite catastrophic. What that resulted in another report that we sent through to Minister Mahuta. So yeah, we called it the Central Government Investment and Flood Protection Scheme. So I guess we just don't want to let this go. We just see it as too important going forward. And we've been advised that Minister Mahuta is viewing the Westport as a test case for potential co-investment. So we of course know that there's a bit of a shortage of resources in the West Coast, and so at a national level we're trying to help them out as much as we possibly can. In terms of the next steps, what we're after, of course, as part of this presentation, is we're after endorsement from each of the regional councils. So obviously after endorsement from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council here, quite a few of the other regional councils have put forward the paper and provided presentations, and obviously we're collectively getting that endorsement from regional councils. We've got a sort of a major media plan going ahead, so we've got a release to go out immediately after this meeting, and so we really want to build that community support. And then we continue to seek meetings with as many of the resilience ministers and any ministers that we can, just to try and get our message across. So that's it in a nutshell. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, and I imagine between myself, Chris, and the chairman, we should be able to answer them.
Thank you. And the part of the next steps is this is an agenda item for the regional sector central government hui, which was to be the 1st of July. It might be deferred, I think, Stuart. So, councillors, papers open for discussion. Councillor Nees.
Just a question, thank you. fair to say the earlier reports had a bit of a lukewarm reception from central government for co-investment. And I'm just interested to know if you think the National Adaptation Plan has strengthened our case for co-investment.
Yeah, I can start off answering that one if you like, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Councillor Nees, I guess we're a little bit disappointed with that National Adaptation Plan because flood protection wasn't rated in the top 10. We pushed as hard as we possibly could, but there's a few other voices in there and we got drowned out to a certain extent. So we've sort of gone back and provided submissions that we think they've got it wrong, but we haven't heard back yet whether they're going to reconsider that.
Just I'd like to make a comment. I think this is a no-brainer and we should put our full weight behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. And I don't think there was reticence from the government, President Crosby or Mark. It was a matter of financial constraints and the prioritisation of the other spend. But I think there's a general recognition that this should be high on the Crown's agenda in terms of the ability to fund some of this stuff. That'd be right, Mark?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think that's the major pushback is from Minister Mahuta is that there's so much stuff that they need to fund, and they sort of made a decision on what stuff they're going to fund in the immediate future. And of course, as you know, we're continuing to lobby to get her to reconsider that decision.
Councillor Crosby.
Obviously, I support the initiative, and I think it's yet another demonstration that local government and regional government do need to go back to, dare I say it, pre-89, where there were financial assistance rates for a range of activities. And we're seeing it play out in the Three Waters, we're seeing it play out here on this matter. We're going to see it play out with regard to the climate change and adaptation, which I agree with Mark, was very weak in the funding part. And certainly LG&Z's made some pretty forceful submissions along those lines as well. And we need to get back to a partnership approach with all the Crown, local government, and also other parties that are involved. This expectation that local government on its own can now has the resources for this is just it's a failure in the system. It's a system failure that's been building up for a long period of time. So this is one initiative, and I'm quite sure it'll be followed by others. And we all know the difference in if you added up all the rates and taxes collected in this country, the local government sector gets about 10-12% or something, which is about a third less than most other comparative countries. And so this rebalance of funding in any shape or form really does need to take place, or nothing will get done.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, kia ora, everybody. I guess I'm just aghast at the think that only 150 million bucks is on the table. I mean, as a child at Edgecombe, having gone through that flood and several others, and yesterday afternoon in the upper reaches of the Whakatane River, seeing what potentially could happen downstream in Whakatane if things go amiss, I'm absolutely aghast that the government would not give this stuff the highest priority. And I just don't think 150 million bucks across New Zealand would go anywhere. Are we not pitching it too low, or are we not lobbying correctly, or don't they just see, what the implications of not doing this particular funding aspect, the implications are? I guess, yeah, just quite outstanding, That'll do.
Yeah, just quickly through you, Mr. Chair. So it's 150 million a year, Councillor Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, councillors. It's been moved by Councillor Nees, seconded by Councillor Crosby. No further discussion. I'll put the resolution that we adopt the three recommendations there. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, can we go back to 9.6? Ruth. Welcome, Julie. Welcome, Vanessa.
Tēnā koutou katoa, councillors and chair. I'm going to assume that largely the paper will be taken as read. There's a couple of things I just wanted to note for you. If there's no substantial changes in the documentation from today, we could pull the notification date forward a week from the 16th to the 9th of August. And I just wanted to check if you wanted, for the submissions period, 20 working days, which of course is the RMA minimum, or 30 working days, and we'll adjust just the timing from there accordingly. Always happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillors, it's open for discussion. Councillor Nees and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'm happy to move this, and I've got no changes to the actual plan change itself, but I did note in the Section 32 report that there is a reference to the cultural offsetting work being done by Des Hickey, and it said that we put words in the document to describe that. Subsequently, we changed that wording to take out the specific reference to that cultural offsetting work, and we put in just a sentence which was saying that we recognise further work is being done. So I just think that particular section of the Section 32 report does need to be changed a bit to reflect that we then change the words again to make it a little bit more generic rather than specific. But apart from that, very happy to move.
Noted, Councillor Nees, we can do that.
Councillor Nees, do you have a view in terms of answering Ruth's questions about notification times?
Sooner the better.
Councillor Thompson.
Through you, Chair, yeah, I'm very happy to second the recommendations. Councillors, you will be aware that this has been on some journey and that this RPS change is in response to the implementation of the MPS urban development, which is very significant for our region, particularly Tauranga, Western Bay and Rotorua. You will also be aware that you have to have particular regard to the Section 32 report, which Councillor Nees has just referred to and has clearly gone through with a fine-tooth comb, as we're all required to do. So I want to thank her for raising that particular matter. I particularly want to thank staff. I know this has been a considerable journey and it has been at times I guess the subject of some discussion, but I do want to thank staff for the diligence that they have applied to the task in hand. I want to thank them for their professionalism. I want to thank them for always responding appropriately to the Council's views on various matters. You've demonstrated a great deal of professionalism and patience, and I thank you for that. I do believe that today is a milestone in terms of the journey of this particular plan change. And again, I want to acknowledge the effort that's gone into this particular matter by staff. So I'm absolutely delighted to second the motion that Councillor Nees has put, and that'll do me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. We've got Councillor Winters, then Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in reference to this, and can somebody clarify, as part of this adoption of this Plan Change 6 for urban development, there's a reference into a document in our appendices from an ME consulting about Rotorua, spatial planning and the likes. If we adopt, it was commissioned by Rotorua Lakes Council. If we adopt this today, we're not necessarily adopting the report from ME Consulting. Is that correct? It's just there for our reference. It's not part of this plan change?
Yes, that's correct, through you, Chair, Mr. Chair. No, you're adopting the Section 32, which has the technical documents that you refer to in as appendices. So I don't believe you're adopting that each of the HBA reports that are in the
referenced in this section 32.
Thank you. That's what I need to know. Happy to support.
Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. When I understand that we have to go through this process to put it into our regional policy statement, and I also believe it's a tool, but what worries me is that this particular tool promotes the risk of development by regulation, and that's not always necessarily sustainable development, and will be pressured to create development in places that may not, in the long term, be appropriate, and all the other placemaking requirements that the TLAs would be required, to support that development. And again, I do support it as a principle, but I'm always worried about regulation or regulatory forced development. It's not a good way to go about it.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. And just to endorse those comments, and because I'm going to put the resolution soon, could I just also acknowledge the contribution and effort that Councillor Thompson's made as Chair of Strategy and Policy, because I know this has been through that vehicle a couple of times, and a lot of concerns that councillors had. You've obviously worked well with staff to iron them all out, so we get to a decision today where it would appear that we can adopt this recommendation without any violent disagreement, but having noted Councillor Crosby's commentary. So, councillors, any further comments? If not, resolutions of the recommendations have been moved and seconded. I'll put them. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Julie. Nessa, Ruth, very much. So that takes us to 9.5. I see we have Dean Kimpton with us. So that is the Tauranga Stadium project from priority 1, 287 of your agenda, councillors. So who's leading this? You leading it, are you, Dean?
Yes, I'm. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just going to now share my screen, if that's okay, and I'll give council an overview. But as I do that, can I thank you very much for the opportunity just to give an update on behalf of the team, of which I'm only one member. That update on behalf of the team, just as to where this opportunity sits. So now, in the spirit of multitasking, can everybody see that? I've gone into presentation mode. Can you see that?
See that? Yes.
So what I understand is I'll give a very brief overview, about 10 minutes of the proposed stadium, and there's about 10 minutes of questions as I understand it. So I look forward to that. And just like I said, I'm presenting on behalf of the team. So look, this feasibility report's come out of what I understand is a number of years, if not decades, of consideration as to what the opportunity is for the sub-region to develop a stadium that was fit for purpose and for the needs of the community. And so on that note, the key requirements that were anticipated and set before the consultants by the governance group that set across this initiative were to enable near constant use, community use of the domain on the basis that ended up being the preferred location. We'll talk about that shortly. That worked well for the community, professional sports and commercial events. Took care of revenue generation to the degree that would help the facility break even, and complemented the wider facility network. And I'll talk about that not just with respect to Tauranga, but also the wider region. And something that was world leading and clever in its approach. And we'll talk about some of those dimensions as we go through. So let me start, first of all, in terms of creating a regional context. So the consulting team, where are these facilities? Where is Tauranga? Where does this Western Bar plenty sit across provision of these facilities? And you can see there that that's been acknowledged by host cities and facilities that support those, And then there's some detail around what that provision is, what the population is. And so these are all, I guess, contextual inputs for determining location and nature of facility. We also looked at a range of options for a facility within the Tauranga city area. And you can see how we consider that in terms of potential location options. Early on, the domain was identified, or wharepai domain was identified as a preferred location by others. The most recent study has come back and confirmed that that was the case. So you can see its location, and you can see, and this became a very important part of the consideration of that site, that preferred line of sight towards Mao or the Mount. Alongside of that, of course, was, well, the development of a potential multi-use arena or stadium doesn't occur in isolation. You see on the right-hand side the domain as it sits today. We considered the relationship of that domain with the balance of the refresh through that central business district area. And we thought walking and cycling connections, we thought pedestrian access, we considered public transport, and how that area might be used and amongst out of traffic coming in from out of the area, parking, etc. But considering the relationship of this development in the context CBD refresh has been a really important dimension to the work undertaken. It has to work in harmony with that and add to it. So when we talk about a stadium, what do we actually mean? So let me cut to it, and I'm going to take you through very quickly some of the principles around location and design that represent all I can get in a 10-minute period. So many of you will recognise, if not all of you, the domain, an aerial shot of the domain. And you'll see transposed onto this the preferred location of the actual stadium facility itself. You can see there not only where the field of play would be for any sports-related activities, but you'll see the stadium outline, okay? And also note that we've got these dashed lines, so that's just reaffirming walking and public access around the balance of that proposed stadium. This is a shot from the southwestern end looking towards the Mount, just to give you a view of what that line of sight might be. So that's been much debated. I guess the only other comment I'd make is that if you wanted a television-ready shot, you'll probably do it from the top of the stadium and you'll get a clearer view of the Mount. But that is essentially the view shaft that we would protect. And I'll talk more about that because the proposal is for a three-sided stadium. In considering stadium options, though, we also compared our recommendation, which is in the red there, with the potential for an enclosed stadium or a stadium with a roof. And you can see the outline there, the dashed outline of Forsyth Bar. And very quickly, the team came to the conclusion that an enclosed stadium or a roof stadium in the domain location was inappropriate for a number of reasons. Height, bulk, height and location was inconsistent. And also we wanted to protect that view shaft. As you look from right to left, the view shaft towards the Mount is out to the left. In the red, you can see the proposed profile of the stadium. And note that the field itself will be lowered slightly from existing ground level to tie in with where the cricket field is. So here's a plan view of it. You can see prevailing widths coming in from that top left-hand corner of your screen. So with a three-sided stadium, it's reasonably well protected from the elements year-round. So that was also an important consideration. You can start to see now not only the seating around the perimeter of the field, but also some of the facilities that are proposed with that. like I said, this is just a block diagram. It's designed to give an impression of what could be achieved, and provision for temporary seating at this at that eastern end. But a stadium in isolation, for considering how it works with the balance of the domain, is going to be short-sighted. So you can see we've considered event mode with the stadium, and it opens up that the whole of the domain should have a music festival, an arts festival, or some other multiple sports event or activity. You can see cultural festivals. You can see that we can open up the full domain area with each of these yellow spots representing a different activity, maybe a small stage, whatever, with the main event occurring where the stadium itself is proposed to be located. What I want to do now, and I'm moving fast, apologies for that, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the design elements in it, just so you get a feel for how it might work. You can see this block diagram through here, but part of the strategy is to have a concourse area that allows easy access out to the left on your screen or to the south. And if we go to, so these are, if we go to this one here, that gives you a perspective on it. So a concourse area allows you to look through the stadium from southern end. It gives nice access to the rear of that site, and it allows for that continuity of experience. Okay, that's perspective from that western corner. And likewise, here's another shot of it. And you can see the mount in the far background, and you can see the stadium seating. We'll talk about extended capacity. The capacity of the stadium, as we currently know it, permanent seating is in the order of 8 to 10,000. We can sort of double that with temporary seating, which is what this cross-section shows. So you can see the permanent seating. And here you can start to see in this light blue or lilac colour where temporary seating would be able to go around the three corners of that stadium. Okay. That's for expansion mode. It allows those larger games or larger events to occur within the stadium. We've been very thoughtful about why we're recommending a three-sided stadium, and nothing like a picture, and I've got two pictures here, one of Central Coast and one of a proposed development in Bath in the UK, to show what a three-sided stadium can achieve. And I think this one probably tells the story best of how a three-sided stadium can open up that vista, provide for a great visitor experience and participation, because you can bring the crowds in close to the field of play. And then here in Bath, whilst you don't have the sea outlook, you have heritage, an environment where you've got a similar three-sided stadium. The point behind these two slides is, one is to give you a view of what can be achieved, but secondly, to show you that a three-sided stadium proposal works and is entirely feasible. It's certainly not where the team started, but it's definitely where the team's ended up. One of the other things that has been considered and will need to be developed in the next stage of the feasibility study is the technology that goes with this, so that it's just, it's not a visitor experience in isolation from technology, for both those at the stadium or those at home watching. That's a piece of work to be done. There was a number of recommendations that came out of that feasibility work. You'll see them here. These were adopted by the governance group, which was to have an open-air boutique stadium along the lines that I've just shared with you. That was a charitable trust be explored to operate that, own that facility, to go on to the next step, which was a detailed case and undertake further engagement, of which this is part, but certainly deeper engagement with industry and community. And the governance oversight of this program continues. those were the recommendations, those were accepted. And this slide here just gives you a quick view of what the program is going forward at this stage. And I'll refer to Hugh Hutchinson, who's in this meeting today, just to give an update, perhaps if there's a question on that, as to where we're at. But generally speaking, we're on track. The objective is to have a stadium opening in December 26. So if that's the case, then you can see there's a lot of work to be done. I feel like I've run through that very quickly, but I'm more than happy to take questions. But that is certainly an overview of the proposed multi-use arena. I'll rest on this.
Thank you for that.
As a reminder.
Thank you for that, Dean. And yes, it was a quick traverse through what's proposed, but it was probably adequate in terms of the resolutions we've got in front of us today. Councillors, open for discussion. We've got Councillor Von Duddleson, Councillor Thompson.
Dean, it's with great pleasure that I would like to move the motions. I've been a strong advocate for a stadium for Tauranga for many years. I've submitted to Tauranga City Council on it. I got encouraged when I went to Carter Farm Park and watched the All Blacks play in Wales, and there you had a 70 to 80,000 person stadium without any car parking really for it at all. And what happened was the people had their lunch in town, used the town facilities, came in by public transport, and then they walked to the stadium, and when they left, as in good Welsh tradition, they looked after us in their bars and pubs till 2, 3 in the morning, and it was a fantastic atmosphere. And there were no car parks, so you didn't have to worry about drink driving and those sort of issues, and it works. And so the proof is in the pudding. Cardiff gets huge business attraction from their stadium. This is a lot bigger than we're planning, of course. We need to be fit for purpose. That sounds expensive, but I just think that we're coming of age of a city, and I commend you on your three-sided concept, because I think that having the vista to Mau is a huge win. It's part of who we are and what we are as Tauranga. And I think this, more so than the CBD development, will be a real growing up of Tauranga City as the 5th biggest city in New Zealand. So I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleson, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the recommendations, and I'll be a lot briefer than Councillor Von Duddleson. But I too have been to stadiums across Europe, and I think that this is just going to be incredible for our wonderful city. And I would like to acknowledge Dean and everyone who's been involved in this. And in closing, I would just say that I am channeling the late and great Mayor Noel Pope. This was one of his visions. He had another vision. He wanted flags on the Harbour Bridge, and he didn't get either. But I'm channeling you, Noel, and let's hope that this comes to fruition for you, and that somewhere in the infrastructure that you will be remembered, Noel, for your vision in terms of this. Well done, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Love, Nees, and then Thurston.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean, I'm just wondering, do you have any commitment from the Waikato Chiefs as to whether they would have any of their games over here?
That's been the subject of a lot of discussion. Can I, these comments have reminded me of a couple of things. First of all, we've looked at what the optimum size is. So you've heard me talk 8 to 10,000 permanent, double that, temporary seating, and then you can expand to 30, 40, 50 in event mode. And we built that around our view of what sort of games and what level of game that we can attract. So that includes the Waikato. So they do have a home stadium, as you know, and they need to share those games around the region, let alone their away games. So we have not assumed. We would love to see one game a year. If we can get more, that would be great. But we're part of a broader Chiefs franchise, okay? And then when it goes to size, and I just want to close on this comment, the size that you've got is optimal for spectator experience and based on what the average size of these games are, okay?
Thank you.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Very exciting. I'd love to see that up and be able to experience the vibe from a facility that'll provide. My question is with regard to cultural values and support for Māori. I notice in our report you say that cultural engagement has formed a key part of the feasibility study, and it is on the past site, and that you're proposing to blend in Māori design, but unfortunately I didn't have time to go through all of the papers that you provided us. You were very generous with the information. So can you just outline for us the support you've got from Tangata Whenua here in Tauranga Moana for your concept?
Yeah, certainly. So thank you for that. We had both a high-level cultural assessment undertaken as part of considering the design and location. So that was an independent professional assessment undertaken by Botha Miskell, and that identified a number of opportunities, including design, but also cultural site and orientation. And then we had representation on the governance group as well. And so that's where the historical use of wharapai and particularly the line of sight to Mao became very important. And alongside the cost and the bulk and location impact of an enclosed stadium, protection of that view shaft being so important were key cultural elements in the design and consideration. So my view is we have front-ended really appropriately that cultural input. Having said that, the next stage, the detailed business case, takes that further again, and particularly as we start to think about more detailed design elements. Hugh, I know that you're there. Do you want to add anything else in on that one from your perspective on behalf of Priority One?
Yeah, Dean, just quickly, a little bit of detail. You mentioned the governance group, of course, and the representation on that governance group is Donna Gardner and Melanie Tata. We also have a working group that feeds into that governance group. And on that, we have Buddy McCree and Perry Kuhu. So again, we've got really good representation. And I think throughout the process, but particularly the period of the feasibility study, there's been quite a lot of engagement, and I'm very pleased to say that there has been a very positive support from all mana whenua.
Councillor Thurston.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And Dean, thank you very much. Three of us around the table represent Rotorua. And I've got to say right up front, I fully support this and I'll be voting for the recommendation. But I heard Councillor Thompson's comments, and it may even predate Mayor Pope. But I distinctly recall, and forgive me if it sounds like a history lesson, but I distinctly recall the City Fathers in the Bay of Plenty some years ago saying that we really do only need one international class stadium for the Bay of Plenty. And the agreement was that it would be sited in Rotorua, which, dare I say, as I've just found out, having driven here back from Tauranga, is less than an hour from Tauranga. But I'll fully support this, but and because I know it's multifunctional and it's going to suit the needs of Tauranga going forward. It's a very exciting innovation, and as I say, and and repeatedly I'll be supporting it. But Dean, needless to say, those who have explored this as the initial stages of the business case will have spoken to RLC here and know that we do in fact, less than an hour from Tauranga, have an international class stadium, which I know Councillor Winters and Councillor White will support me when I describe it as underutilised, and I stop short of saying it's a white elephant. But I do put that in front of all of us as we make this decision that yes, every town needs to have one, no doubt, and I'll be fully supporting it. But I just beg colleagues to be aware that over your back fence you have a grossly underutilised one that was initially built to accommodate the future needs of the Bay of Plenty. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. I see Councillor White had your hand up, but you've disappeared. So you said what you're going to say, has he, Councillor White?
Oh, absolutely. I had my thumb up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sorry. Any further discussion, councillors? So all I could comment on, Dean, is you've had a pretty easy ride today. And I'd just like to put a bit of realism into the consideration. And my colleagues are enthusiastic about this. It looks great in terms of the concept you've got here in terms of the Central Coast Stadium. But at the end of the day, I'll just ask you and your project team to be realistic. As Councillor Thurston said, within an hour of Tauranga here, you have 2 other stadiums, and you'll ultimately compete for clientele and for functions. But let's learn from the lessons of history. There's a big difference between concept to the reality. And I know you're using consultants, you use timelines, and I think you said the timeline was 26. You've made some assumptions in terms of funding here, and I could just make a plea that across all those disciplines that I've mentioned, this is a realistic approach taken to this. The construction of stadiums throughout the country is a train wreck in terms of what was initially put on the table in terms of costings from concept through to the reality. And currently we're not dealing with, but you've got Christchurch staring at you, which I think has probably had a 50% increase from concept to where they think they're going to get to. Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin was another one. So I think there's only one group of people who ultimately pay for this, and it'd be very nice to have in the Western Bay here. And it becomes a community facility. Let's be clear, they don't wash their face in terms of return on investment, but it's nice to have in the community and people can be proud of it. So again, I'll just ask you, make a plea, Hugh, to you as well, Hugh, that you take a realistic approach to this and that you put in front of the community the realistic cost right up front that we can deal with. And if people get a realistic cost put in front of them, you deliver it within the time frame, within the budget, it's better than being 25%, 30% out of the budget.
And on that positive note.
So, on that positive note.
Chair, could I possibly just make a comment?
Yes.
Which I think is really important to say. So I am project manager for this currently. I am a consultant in my own right, but I work part-time for Priority One, and that is my role with Priority One. And I couldn't agree more with what you say. And along with our consultant team, which Dean has managed extremely well during the course of the feasibility phase, we've looked very carefully at that. And we have looked very carefully at what was being done in New Zealand and what has been done in New Zealand. Now, I also consult for the International Olympic Committee. I've worked on a number of Olympics and a number of venues around the world. And I won't go into detail about my views of what's been done here in New Zealand in the past and what is currently being done. I can assure you, while I'm project manager, it won't be done here. We have proposed to move to set up a trust once the business case is completed, to take the process forward right through to construction. But hopefully I'll still be involved as project manager. I absolutely agree with the points that you raise. Dean has done a very good job in what he's presented today. But for me, perhaps the most important thing is the flexibility and efficiency of this proposed project. So while we talk about capacities of up to 20,000, realistically, I see this as an 8,000 permanent seat stadium that has great flexibility to increase by 500 seats, 1,000 seats, easily up to 12 or even 15,000. But beyond that, I think aspirations for such things as ever hosting an All Blacks game is not appropriate for this city.
Thank you, Hugh. So I just thought it was hold upon us all to make those realistic comments, especially when you're dealing with some of the ones like you had. Don't want to go into that. But anyway, I look forward to this. The recommendation, as council is clear in terms of what the recommendation means. It's been moved and seconded. In further discussion, there being none, and I'll put it. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
9.8, monitoring responding to central government reform. Do we have Stephen Lamb with us on Zoom? It's online. We'll take your paper as read, Stephen, if you're here.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Okay, just follow Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I was bewildered, as I often am, by this report. My first bewilderment was, why is this not going to strategy and policy? My second was, there's policy on the hoof here, and I'll give you an example, and that is around the local government reform, where it says position, there's a strong case for change as the status quo is not fit for purpose. Well, if that's the council's position, we should have had a full and extensive discussion before arriving at a position like that. So my real concern is that, I think that, positions on central government reform do need to come to the appropriate committee to be discussed and analysed appropriately. And I'm just bewildered as to why this report has come to the council today. Thank you.
So that's probably a question for the Chief Executive.
Yes, and we're very happy for it to be referred to strategy and policy. It's really the timing as to why it came to full council instead of strategy and policy. We were seeking to get it to you by the end of the financial year to inform what we're doing forward, but it really was the timing. But again, it does, and it would be worthy in terms of having the debate that normally happens at strategy and policy. So if you would like to defer it to strategy and policy.
I would be happy to receive the report and have a recommendation that the report be referred to the Strategy and Policy Committee for further discussion. And I'd be happy to move that as a motion.
Happy to second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, but in defence of staff taking the position I have, Councillor Thompson, as you've heard many times, given the process of the Three Waters reform, given the process of the RMA reform, I think it's reasonable to make not an assumption, but a calculated measurement here that will put local government current structures under immense pressure. And I think all staff are doing is putting that position in front of us. And we're fortunate enough to have Councillor Crosby, who's a lot closer to what the impact of those two reforms that I mentioned is likely to have. But I'm happy with the resolution that you've put on the table. So you've moved it, I've seconded it. Is there any further comment required from anybody? Councillor Crosby?
I do support Councillor Thompson's recommendation. We have a more detailed conversation in the policy area. What I would also say is that time is ticking on some of these, and the government, rightly or wrongly, is pursuing at least two with some pace, and we do need to have an understanding and a collective position as a regional council. Noting our swim lane on some of them, they will be different to a TLA, but I think collectively, particularly for the elected members, we need to have a very good understanding of what's happening here and how they impact on our communities moving forward. We are their representatives, And if you look at the ARM space, for example, it's unbelievably complicated. It's incredibly complicated, and you need to deconstruct that into bites that you can understand and move forward. Most importantly, to submit on when that comes to the House, I think later in the year, that particular piece of legislation. So it is important we get our head around it. We do understand we've got an election that's going to come up as well, and there will be some changes on council. And again, a critical part of the induction will be baptism by fire for those new elected members to get their head around, these major changes that are being proposed. So what I'm saying in short is we need to spend some time on these. Some good time.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby. And could I just stress the importance of getting in front of this? And I think it's fair to say that a lot of our colleagues in the local government family, the light switch hasn't gone on in terms of the pace of some of this change and what the implications are. So fully endorse the opportunity to have a discussion here, but as Councillor Crosby said, the train's left the station on some of this. Any further commentary? Councillor Von Dallison.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did mention it at the last workshop that we had for Stratford. I think I did a good, pretty good look at the budget, the 2022 budget, and there isn't sufficient funds allocated in the next 3 years to put this. There's some contingency past there. So I think there's no doubt that we're going to have RMA reform no matter what. But so we do need to be prepared, and we do need to be thinking about it now. But it's no good thinking about it when it actually comes up. But to expect it to go through before the next election, for instance, is probably unrealistic. Not to say, as I say, I think there's a general consensus across Parliament that RMA reform does need to happen. So that's why I think we need to be circumspect how we deal with this, but it is absolutely correct that we actually keep moving forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Von Dallison. So, councillors, you have the recommendation up there. Oh, sorry, Councillor Neese.
Thank you. I totally support Councillor Thompson's recommendation. I believe this is something we really do have to have a good conversation about, because I think there's a gap in the paper. When we talk about responding to reform, it's about how we do our business in the circumstances of such massive change. And I'm reminded of some conversations we've had lately that the faster the speed and the greater the magnitude of change, the greater the likelihood of lower quality outputs is. And I think we need to keep that in mind. We've got to keep on focusing on delivery. But we've got our challenges. I know that we've lost some staff in our iwi engagement area, and it has proven more difficult to engage with tangata whenua. I don't want that to be slowing us completely down so that we don't meet the timeframes that we've set for delivery of our policy program. So I think we need to have a conversation about how much is good enough, whether we should go as far as we can within the timeframe we've got available, i.e. get it 80% right, knowing that whatever we put up is going to go through, and I'm talking plan changes here, go through an environmental process, for example, which is going to be completely altering it. So I do think we need to have the other side of the conversation, not just our position on the reform, but also how we're going to respond and how we're going to work as a council to continue delivering what we need to do for our communities while we are being overrun by massive change. So I'm looking forward to the conversation at strategy and policy.
Thank you, Councillor Neese. So just before I put it, could I implore Councillor Thompson that time is not on your side? As you know, we've got a bit of a recess in July. So I think in August, and I don't know what the date is, I think it should be on the agenda for that. You just need to keep up with President Crosby in terms of the status of the bill that's currently in Parliament, especially the Three Waters one, and quickly followed by the RMA one. So, councillors, there's the recommendation in front, the resolution in front of us. I'll put it. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, councillors. I know that you've got a long weekend coming up, so in the interest of giving you as much time as you can, put your feet up. I'm not going to have an afternoon tea break, so I'm going to crack on. 9.9, maritime vessel procurement.
I'd like to move the recommendations.
Thank you,
Happy to
councillor
second.
Thompson. Councillor Rose to second it. Mr. Winters. Councillor Winters.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Support this. We've been over this. We've adopted the PC sum into our long-term plan. So this is essentially about the procurement process, Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit nervous about some of the specifications for this vessel, knowing where it's going to go. It's going to be operating out of Whakatane, Ahopi Harbour, Ohiwa Harbour, Apotiki through the new groins when they're finished. And it's also going to have operational capacity for Te Kaha and Waihao Bay. So this is something very new on our radar. Sarah, did you have there was a fourth resolution we were going to look at in terms of the specifications. Do you have that on with Tona?
Through you, Chair, we just acknowledge that we've had a few questions about that specification list that's attached to the procurement plan over the last day, and we were suggesting that if it's appropriate, we could include an additional recommendation that just notes that staff will work with councillors that are interested to take on board their concerns before we go out to tender, which is essentially what this procurement plan is asking to do. So we can tease out some of those concerns, make sure we incorporate it in the specification list, and then we go out for tender. So if that's appropriate, we could include a recommendation that we'll work with interested councillors before going out.
Yeah, I'm happy to have that as a number 4, Mr. Chairman, just so that we get the process right. This is procurement. Yep, it's going to take 18 months. Most boats take 18 months to build now. But we want to make sure this vessel is fit for purpose for its long range activities, and it has to be mobile as well in terms of road transport. So I'm just seeking, with the indulgence of whoever moved it and seconded it, that we have a number 4, that we haven't quite got the specifications right yet. And I've had conversations with John about this, but they were very short conversations, and now that we've seen the specification list, I'd like to add a bit more detail, Mr. Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Winters. I've similarly had conversations with Sarah about this. I don't profess to be a maritime expert, but what I do know is that we're using this vessel. It's not within harbour confines, and it needs to be fit for purpose. And don't underspec it, as opposed to, it needs to be fit for purpose, because frequently all those vessels operating in the Whakatane to the Cape area are essentially 50, 60 foot vessels carrying the sort of number of people that you're talking about. So in terms of procurement, is an open tender, open procurement? I mean, you've got some pretty significant maritime construction companies here in the Bay of Plenty.
Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. The procurement team discussed the likelihood that there would be local regional providers that would be very well suited to respond, but we thought that there should be, to comply with government procurement rules, an open tender.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, you've got the recommendation there. It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Rose. I intend to put it. Okay, intend to put it. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 9.10.
Move recommendations.
Recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. We have a seconder. Any discussion? Seconded, Councillor Crosby. Any discussion? This is essentially just a renewal, isn't it? There's currently a contractor that does this. Councillor, please.
Sorry, just a question. Are we able to recover costs incurred by the removal of debris? For example, something vessels, etc. Obviously, logs are harder to track, but I just wanted to know if we've got any cost recovery in place.
Yes, we currently do, certainly with sunken vessels. If we know the owner, we can seek all costs associated with retrieval. The primary thing in terms of debris in this contract is around logs, and we also work with the stevedore companies and seek when we know who was loading the log, and that we can seek costs as well.
Yes. Okay, no further discussion? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 10. LGNZ remits, late item. Oh, you got it even online. I was a bit surprised, Councillor Crosby, there's only about 4 or 5. You'd be pleased with that?
Yes, we got 11, I think, all up. Some are deferred to existing programs, and there may be one more that comes up. It's still going through National Council.
Okay, councillors, paper is pre-circulated. Got the recommendations there. This gives some direction to the delegates, which are myself and Councillor Nees. What's happy?
Presumably you are content with them.
As presented, but as always, I think we need to reserve the position relative to the discussion at the time. Because whilst the submitters may have put forward the rationale for this, there's no guarantee they might stick to this on the day. So I think you've got to give the delegates the opportunity to, in the context of the discussion, what the amendments made.
I think that's only sensible. Has it been moved? If not, I'll move it.
No, it's moved. Thank you. Second to Councillor Thompson. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye. Against. Thank you. I'll move that we go into public excluded. Second to Councillor Thompson. All those in favour say aye. Against. Carried.